The league start hype cycle is upon us. After nearly 11 months, new league, that means new league start build guides, and with it come a flurry of accusations about bait. But how do you actually tell if a build is really bait, or if the person following it just RMT'd and didn't level up their main skill gem since level 2, and now they're running around in yellow maps on a level 1 Lightning Strike 3 link? The good news is that even though there's a lot of memeing about bait and all of that, most creators that you find on YouTube and Twitch, they're not going to put their reputation on the line with a crap build. So most of those are actually going to be safe. The reality is, most of the time when you see someone calling out bait, it's more than likely that they just didn't follow the build properly. And instead of asking for help, trying to figure out what they did wrong, it's much easier to just say, this build is bait and it's the build creator's fault. I think actually a great new rule would be, if you see someone calling out bait, ask them to post their POB, ask them to post the POB of the build they were following, compare them. I can almost guarantee, I bet money on it, 99.9% of the time, they have just made some tremendous error that has completely bricked the build, and the build is fine. So, good news, most creators are fine. Most builds that you see posted will be fine, but bait does actually exist, real bait, and today's video, I'm going to show you how to spot it. So let's hop over to POB. First thing you should just look at is this left-hand side of the screen. You can get a little bit of information here, not a ton, but just look at the damage. Does this damage look kind of realistic for what was advertised? Is this a SSF friendly level 80 build and it's sitting at like 10 million damage? That's often a dead giveaway. Looking at the effective hit pool and the Fizzmax hit, is this particularly low or particularly high? I would say for most softcore league starters, like a 10k Fizzmax hit, I would say is normally fine. 8k is like acceptable on certain build types. If it's sitting at like 5k, there might be some kind of problems there. Same with the life. If the life is like under 3,000, unless there is some stipulation about using Mom or Energy Shield or something like that, that can also be a bit of a giveaway. Mana, look at the unreserved mana. Also look at the mana cost and mana cost per second. On some builds, you will see mana cost is like 23, mana cost per second is 62, but we only have 55 unreserved mana, but the mana regen is 16, and this build has leech, so this should actually be able to sustain its mana. However, sometimes you'll see like mana cost per second is 250, and the unreserved mana is like 100, and there's seemingly no mana recovery. That you could run into a lot of problems with. Another thing is recovery. Does this build have forms of recovery? And then just armor, evasion rating, block chance suppression, and resistances. So this is like the starting point. From here, what you can look at are the skills. So with the skills, what you're looking out for are the gems realistic, again, for that point of progression? So like this is an end game version of it. There's also like the early maps where it's only on a 5 link, but let's just say this is the end game. Is it using overly high level gems? Is it using too many links? So let's say on a leveling version, you're not going to have a 6 link while leveling, right? Early maps, a 5 link is realistic. So you could say this is an early maps build, and okay, it's using a 5 link. The gems don't have quality because you wouldn't have quality. It's on a 5 link. That's realistic. If you start going over to, let's say, the early endgame, and this is being advertised as a cheap thing, and it's got like a level 21-20 lightning strike, Val lightning strike, which is, you know, very expensive, and it's got awaken multi-strike and awaken cold damage. That's a bit of a dead giveaway. So check out the gem levels, look at how many are being used. Are there awaken gems? Do they all have quality at a point that wouldn't be realistic? Next thing is to look at the items. So items, I'm going to look at the early maps version. So if a build has a lot of uniques or very expensive or rare uniques, I'll show you how to check that in a second. And those are required to make the build work. That can also be a bit of a warning where you can say, this thing is using like a tier 2 unique on the early maps version. Am I actually going to be able to get that? Next thing is to check out the rare items. Look at the modifiers on it. So this is like a very realistic 300 LE DPS claw. I know I can get this from like ROG or even just like a drop on the ground, maybe even a gamble. How is this helmet? Does it have like a ton of high level eldritch implicits? Are these modifiers that are things you think you could find? Yeah, I would say that with this and this. Does it have like tier 1 life on a leveling version? Do the boots have tier 1 movement speed and like action speed? Is the amulet realistic? Does it have an unrealistic anoint? And then looking at the flasks, same thing. So one of the things I said was, are there overly rare uniques in the build at a stage that you wouldn't have them? Over on PoE Wiki, I'll link this in the description. You can see this is an analysis of unique item tiers where you can actually check the tier of all unique items. So tier 5 is very common, tier 1 is much less common, and then tier 0 is extremely rare. As you go down, you can actually see these are the tiers. So if this build is using Dread Arc, this is a tier 5 unique, probably going to find it in the campaign. If you don't, then you should find it at least on the trade side for a couple of Chaos or a couple of Alchemies very early. If it's using like a Katava's Feast in the leveling thing, and this is a tier 1 unique, am I going to find this on a leveling build or like early maps? Probably not. In that case, does the build need it to function? Like if it doesn't have this unique, is it just going to suck? And most build guides, they will state these things, but if they're not stating these things, that's a bit of a warning sign. So go through, if you see a whole lot of uniques, if the creator doesn't talk about them, especially if you're like, isn't that one quite rare? Have a look at this and see. You'll be able to tell, is this actually realistic? The next thing is conditionals. So these are effects such as when X happens, Y happens. When you kill a monster, gain onslaught for 4 seconds, that kind of thing. I mean, all builds use these, so it's perfectly normal to have these. However, it is possible to really inflate your POB with unrealistic conditionals. So we can head over to the config section, and this is where you're going to see a whole lot of conditionals. So things like power charges, frenzy charges, endurance charges. This is an easy one to check. Is this build generating power charges realistically and often? Frenzy charges, endurance charges, you can actually go and check. So you can see, where are we getting the power charges from? So we can go over here and see, all right, Assassin's Mark, and they're getting power charges on bosses with the quality from Assassin's Mark. As for frenzy charges, you can see, okay, we're getting it from Blood Rage, so you're getting that while mapping. And then over at the tree, Mark Mastery, gain a frenzy charge when you hit your marked enemy. You can control F, type in frenzy, and see, okay, where are these coming from? Over here, there's some more stuff to do with frenzy charges. All right, I would say that's pretty consistent, getting it on bosses, getting it while mapping. Endurance charges, where are those coming from? And this is where you can start saying, is this actually a realistic thing that we are getting? Retaliation, is it coming from the anoint maybe? Not there. Control F endurance charge and see, where is this coming from? Could maybe say it's coming from Claws of the Magpie. It might be coming from this Timeless Jewel. Maybe it's from an anoint. Hopefully the creator has explained where it is coming from, but you could say like, is this actually realistic? No. Let's turn that off and then see how it affects the effective hit pool. Then onslaught, again, you can say, where is the onslaught coming from? So Control F onslaught, you can see, all right, it's coming from here. Getting it while mapping. Are you getting it while bossing? Probably not, but in this case, at least this is my build. So I explained, for bossing, you can maybe swap out your granite flask or jade flask for a silver flask, and then you at least have some uptime of onslaught. But with conditionals, another thing that is important is to understand the function of the build. What is the build being used for? Is this primarily a mapping build, or is it primarily a bossing build? So if it is primarily a mapping build, and it has onslaught checked, and you're getting onslaught like a 20% chance to get onslaught on kill or 10% chance to get it, I would say that's realistic. This is completely realistic. Fortification, another one that is commonly ticked. Where is this coming from? You can check through the things. Getting it from this implicit on the chest, that is realistic. I would say you are hitting, let's say you have melee hits for 9% chance to fortify. We are hitting 8 times a second. So yes, we probably are going to have max fortification. Also check out the build video. If there's gameplay, just look at the buffs at the top left, see if those are actually up and active. Rage is one that you will very often see where it is pushed up to like 50 or 70. So in this case, look where the rage is coming from. A common one is Eldritch Gloves. Gain 1 rage on hit, and then you have 70. Are you actually going to have 70 rage, or is it more often going to be sitting around 30? Then same thing with this. A big one over here is shock. Lots of people, well, actually not a lot of people, but some people will have their shock effect maxed out at like 50 or 60% like this. And then you go like, how are they getting such high shock, especially against bosses? How are you getting like 50% shock? That is like a pretty big thing to have in a build. And if the person making the build guide isn't saying how they're getting 50% shock consistently on bosses, I'll say it's like a bit of a red flag. So something like 20, probably much more realistic. Ignite, chill, scorch, all of that. Is the build actually dealing damage of those types to inflict those ailments? The last thing that is obviously a dead giveaway is this over here. Is the enemy a boss? The standard for most builds is Guardian Pinnacle. I think that PoE actually defaults to this now, but if it's set to no, this is like the reddest of red flags. This is just like, oh, hell no. Like, don't play that build. If someone has like manually gone and clicked this from that, just run away quickly, because that's just a big yikes. Next thing you can check is over here, custom modifiers. So some builds, they will have custom modifiers that should be explained. Like over here, returning projectile equates to around 30% more damage. Unbound avatar average damage, 40% more damage. Like you could turn that off really, but that's something there. Buff life roll and gear. These are all explained. If there is just something like, I don't know, 500% more damage, and you're like, what the frick is that from? Then again, major red flag, especially if it is not explained. Next, checking out the Calcs section, and this is primarily to do with defenses. So the way I think about defenses in PoE is a layering. So you've got different layers. You've got your avoidance layer. When a hit comes in, are you able to avoid taking that damage? Then the next layer is, after you do get hit, are you able to mitigate it? Are you able to reduce the amount of incoming damage? Then after you've taken that mitigated hit, you've got your HP layer. This might be Mind Over Matter, just life, or energy shield. Does the build have enough life to soak that up? And then after that, very important and often overlooked with a lot of builds is recovery. Once you've taken that hit, survived it, how do you get the life back? So this is the kind of thing you should be looking out for on builds. It's like, how is this build avoiding damage? If it does, if it needs to, not all builds have to avoid damage, but they might want to avoid ailments or something like that. Does this build have any ailments avoidance, or is it going to constantly just get frozen, locked in place, and killed? Then is it mitigating damage in some way? Like, does it have armor? Does it have Fizz taken as elemental? Although that's not really a thing, but a big one. A lot of builds on League Start will die because of Fizz max hit being way too low. They'll just get slapped and killed. So how's the Fizz max hit looking? Where is this Fizz max hit coming from? You can check through here, like damage taken, go through all of these, hover over it and see. I'm not going to do like a full-on POB guide, but just as an outline, you can see where some of this is coming from. One of the big things with Fizz max hit, and this is probably, I see this in even reputable build creators guides, and I don't really like it, but often you will see the Fizz max hit is being quite inflated by a conditional temporary buff. So a lot of builds will have this where it's enabled and they have something like Steel Skin with automation or cost when damage taken Molten Shell, that kind of thing. And you look at it and you're like, wow, this build has 15k Fizz max hit on like no gear. That's so good. And then you go and you turn off the Molten Shell and you're like, hold up, that just dropped by like 40%. So if you're seeing this is a bit of like a, if you turn off the Steel Skin and the Fizz max hit goes down to like 5k or 4k, then it's just like, ugh, this thing is probably going to get splatted in maps really quickly. So this is a big one to check out for. Is there like a temporary defensive buff that has been left on? So go through that, check that the resistances are capped, go through the damage, gems, all of the defenses, look at the items. Is this like a very expensive, rare, unique item? Is this thing going to cost like 20 divines on League Start? Is this Lethal Pride realistic early on? Does it have like a crazy Watcher's Eye? So hopefully that helps. This video wasn't an attempt to call out any creators. It's actually more the opposite. It's more trying to call out the community that has somehow become really emboldened in calling out bait, where I genuinely believe most people calling out bait really just butchered the build and then didn't take accountability, didn't ask for help. Most creators that you follow are going to be safe. You might see some of these things that I called out in the Calcs and stuff, but it's more like, does it have several of these, or is it just like one or two of these? Like, this is my own build, and I have Onslaught checked, which might not be realistic against bosses even with a silver flask, but if it had that and then like level 21 gems and awakened gems and all this other stuff, then it starts looking really sus. Let me show you what a fully PoB warrior version of this exact same build looks like. So here we have 28 million damage. This is the same build, same gear, everything. It's just everything is being adjusted with the calculations. I should actually turn this on, and you can see like, wow, this thing now suddenly deals 28 million damage, and it's got 240k effective hit pool, 17k Fizzmax hit. Like, if you start seeing numbers like this on a league starter, this is when you start saying like, let me go to the config. So bait, it's not actually that common, so don't stress about it. If you see someone in Reddit calling out bait, ask them to post their POB and post the POB of the build they are following, because it's almost always them. Anyway, I'm not going to be posting a build guide this week because I have other plans, but I'm going to be live on stream. Follow me on Twitch, join the Discord, give me a sub and a like if you enjoyed the video. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Stay safe, catch you in the next video, and bye-bye.
It's branching exile. You're making me nervous.